Hello everyone, it's Frank McGuire.
And Christina Dudumas.
And Sabamir.
On today's episode, we are talking about Amazon Prime's upcoming Lord of the Rings series. We're going to tell you everything you want to know about this super high budget project.
We're going to answer your most burning questions, like when and where will it be set?
What characters could we potentially see?
What storylines will we witness be brought to life on the small screen?
And most important question of all, why is there an intimacy consultant already on staff?
And are we going to be seeing Elf and Dwarf naughty bits?
And will they be proportional?
All this and so much more on this episode of Meanwhile Back on the Podcast.
Meanwhile, back on the podcast, four colossal nerds named Saba, Chris, Christina, and Frank have set out to take on a great darkness that has enveloped the world of fandom with their powers of common sense and the strength to take on even the most butthurt Twitter mobs and insufferable comment section trolls. They fight for truth, objectivity, and nuance in the conversation and debate over fictional made-up shit.
So like we said in the introduction, we are sitting down today to talk about the Lord of the Rings Amazon Prime series that's going to be, looks like it's going to debut in 2021. That's their target date. We wanted to sit down and kind of unpack this thing because honestly, I'm not the biggest Lord of the Rings fan. My experience mainly has been with Peter Jackson's trilogy, and honestly, I felt like the first one was a little bit lacking in action. It was kind of slow.
Okay, that is a very different opinion than I have, but continue.
But, you know, it's not that I didn't enjoy it. It's just I don't know. I guess coming from my generation of growing up with okay, let me try and put it in this context. Frodo as a hero to me was kind of hard to identify with as a hero. And the reason that is because of I think it's my generational landscape. I come from the times of Rambos and you know, Conan the Barbarian and Terminators and a lot of capes and cowls. So Frodo was like this, he was kind of like I don't know, he's the anti aesthetic to what a hero is supposed to look like. And it took a while for it to kind of like, I don't know, appeal to me.
For me, it was just the opposite. This boy, this, you know, hobbit in the middle of nowhere in Shire Town. He was the thing that really struck a chord with me is that he's just a good person and he got thrown into this and it wasn't the burden that he wanted, but it's one that he knew he had to carry. And, you know, at the very end, you know, because I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you've watched the trilogy and you know what happens. But at the very end of Return of the King, when, you know, Aragorn is walking and everyone is bowing to him and the four hobbits, you know, Samwise, Pippin, Merry, and Frodo are there and they go to bow to Aragorn. And he says, "No, my friends, you bow to no one," or something to the effect of that. And everyone bows to these four little hobbits who like, didn't, you know what I mean? Like came from this smallest little town and did these extraordinary things. You know, it didn't matter of their size or stature. And that's like, yeah, I ate that shit up, man.
Yeah. At the end I did too. Like at the end, I definitely got that. Like, you know, I was all in on that. I was like, oh yeah, this is a very poetic ending. There's a lot behind it. There's a lot being said here in the subtext of what just took place. Like the scene you just described. But watching that initial like felt like the first one, Fellowship of the Ring, it just didn't have a pace that I was used to in my action films or my fantasy films.
Well, it is a classic high fantasy, like a very classical form of high fantasy, Lord of the Rings, and really like set the stage, I think, for a lot of fantasy following it in terms of like any like sort of fantasy book kind of gets compared to that because that is sort of like the be all end all of that era. So it definitely is a different vibe for sure. But I ate it all up though. I was really into the books too and the character. I was really, really into that whole thing. I think I had a poster of Legolas, probably, and Aragorn.
Everybody loves the elves. Yeah, I think it was the same for me. Like, I read all the books first, so I was already a fan because I had a great time when I was reading those. And I think I was just really drawn in by the world that was created here and by all the characters and all the different towns and villages and cities and races of people. And I think for me, what I liked best about it was kind of similar to what Saba said, the fact that it was kind of just a random guy from a small town, not who you would have expected to be a hero. And he kind of had to step up to the challenge, but also that he didn't have to do it alone. Like, his 3 best friends came with him for like emotional support, basically. And, you know, they met people along the way who had sort of like the fighting skills to help them so that they would be able to do what they had to do. So
I think the world's a big part of it, but also, can I tell you, like, Sam is the real hero. Like, Samwise Gamgee, man,
of course,
what a friend he was, and like, he freaking carried Frodo. Oh my goodness!
And I think that's a big part of what it's about. It's about friendship. What was one of the main themes of the story for me.
It's definitely about friendship for sure. It's definitely a big part. It's a big theme in that story. But the reason I went into the whole like trilogy, Peter Jackson's trilogy, and my experience with it is because when I started doing research for this Amazon Prime series, I'm pretty stoked, man. I'm pretty excited. Like, this thing sounds epic in scale. It sounds insane. And I'm so glad to see that they're going to go into a new realm of storytelling, a new time period that hasn't been realized on a small screen or a big screen, and really explore it and really cut into it and really show us some of the things that took place before, you know, we got thrown into Peter Jackson's trilogy. You know, I'm really excited to see what takes place with this story. So yeah, so let's get into it. So like I said, what we know so far is that they're targeting 2021. They seem to be in pre-production already. They're already underway, and they've mostly done all of their casting. As far as the main characters go, I think they've done most of the casting. And we're going to get a little bit deeper into the casting as we go with the breakdown. But the filming, what I've heard is that they're near completion of setting up for the first 2 episodes. And they resumed filming back in late September.
Ooh.
So it's already being filmed, but I think maybe COVID got in the way again. But I'm not sure exactly where they're at in that process right now. So they're in New Zealand, which is really cool because I think that ties back into the already existing work that's been done in this franchise. So I think that's really dope.
The one thing I will say as well is that, you know, they actually built like the Shire in New Zealand, and as far as COVID goes, they're doing pretty okay there. The one thing that I'm really excited about this show as well is that, so when the trilogy was coming out, like Peter Jackson and his team and, you know, the companies they worked with were doing some pretty like groundbreaking work, like the stuff they did with Andy Serkis and like becoming Gollum, like that was very groundbreaking, like the landscapes and everything. And seeing something of that production on TV at that time was just not really possible, at least not with the budgets that you were given, right? With Amazon backing this and backing a couple of seasons as well, I'm excited to see that sort of level of it. Like, I know it won't be like this sort of like fake kind of sets or bad CGI or anything else. I'm excited to that part as well, because the world of it, just like you were saying, it digs so deep. And JRR really just, I would say in terms of world building, like, you know, he's really done it all. I mean, the world building behind Lord of the Rings, like, not only, and Frank, we were talking about this, you know, they've created languages, the past of it, not even just the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, but looking back into like the actual, you know, the Silmarillion, that whole book, which has like footnotes and everything at the end. Like, they've created this vast world. So there is so much storytelling that can be done.
Not just that, but the genealogy. I went into the genealogy of like Elrond and his twin brother.
Elros.
And it's crazy, dude. It's crazy. It goes so far back. And I can see where we got where George R.R. Martin got his inspiration to kind of build these incredible lineages.
Frank, he said George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, he's comparing it.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Tolkien for a second. Okay, I was like,
No,
wrong
no,
author.
no.
Sorry.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I know.
Let's leave that in.
Wait.
Let's leave that in. That's funny. But yeah, you know, like he's built these incredible lineages, and I can see where he got the inspiration from, because Tolkien's attention to detail was just so crazy. Like it was like he had an idea of what he wanted. It's funny when you start reading Tolkien mythology and looking back into the genealogy and the family lines of the characters. It almost feels like it's an actual history, like it's an actual country, it's an actual place.
Yeah.
Like it almost reads like that, you know what I mean? Like, you know, when you go back and you look at the Qing dynasty in China, like that's what it kind of echoes to me, is like this level of detail that is so detailed that it could fool you into thinking that it's actually real. Like, and that's incredible to me. I think that's really amazing.
It was definitely one of those books where I had to keep flipping to the map at the beginning just to see, like, wait, where was this person from again? And, like, how are they related to everyone else? So it definitely had me stopping and doing that a bunch of times. But yeah, I liked how everything was kind of tied together and everyone was tied together. There was no character that was just there for no reason.
Yeah. So going back to what we're saying about as far as the actual where they're doing production in New Zealand, I got a good quote here from J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, who are the showrunners. They say, as we search for the location in which we could bring to life the primordial beauty of the second age of Middle Earth, we knew we needed to find somewhere majestic with pristine coasts, forests, and mountains that also is a home to world-class sets, studios, and highly skilled and experienced craftspeople and other staff. And we're happy that we're now able to officially confirm New Zealand as our home for our series based on the stories of J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. So I think that's pretty cool, is that they're, well, when you have the budget that they do, which we're going to tell you about in about a couple seconds, when you have the budget that they do, they really don't need to pick and choose. It's just like, let's go do it. And honestly, you know, Jeff Bezos is a nerd, right? There's probably a passion project for him. Like, you know, it's probably something that he grew up with in his childhood. He's probably like, oh, I read those books, and, you know, I saw that animated movie back in 1978. I still haven't seen that animated movie. I have to see that animated movie. I really want to see it.
People love it. I've never seen it, but my older brother, who's also really into Lord of the Rings, was like, that was like his first introduction to it as well. And then he read the books after seeing that animated movie. But I've heard good things.
And there's a really weird one before that one that's like cell shaded, and it's odd. It uses a very odd animation style. It almost incorporates real photography with animation. I saw it on like City TV like years back or something. It was really, really odd. But okay, so speaking of the level of epicness that this is going to reach, let's start with the fucking budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
The series budget, the season is going to be $1 billion.
No,
Wait.
the budget for the series is $1 billion.
No. The season.
No, I
I
think
didn't-
it's
I didn't
250
read that.
million for the first season.
Yeah, it's for the series.
I read that the budget is rumored to be $1 billion a season.
Where did you read that?
That is crazy, and that seems too much.
Okay, let's confirm.
Let's
confirm.
confirm that, yeah.
Because I got 250 mil. For
Yeah,
the
I got
first
1
season.
billion for the series.
Okay, but they don't know how long they're going to do it.
No, they
for.
said they committed to producing 5 seasons of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Oh, and they've already approved.
Yeah, it's
approved.
5.
Yeah. Okay, and they've already approved season 2.
And
Okay, so
there's
let's-
likely going to be spin-offs and stuff too. They expect that will happen as well. But that's not
Okay,
included
well,
in
that
the
makes
1
sense.
billion. The 1 billion's for the series.
Okay, so for the series. Okay, but still, $250
That's a
million
lot.
a season.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, and so they'll probably do what, 8 to 10 episodes for a first
I
season?
heard that
you
their
think?
first season is like pretty hefty. This is a rumor, and you guys can like look it up and make sure it's right. But I heard that they're thinking of having a first season of almost 20 episodes.
Oh, wow.
20 episodes.
Yeah,
I don't know,
didn't
let me-
even read that. Yeah.
Wow.
That's
Okay, I'm gonna
impressive.
look it up again.
I didn't think that happened anymore. I didn't think people did that anymore.
Well, apparently
I thought,
the
like,
other
13
seasons are
was the
going to
cap.
be your average 8 to 10, but that the first season was supposed to
Oh,
be.
they probably have a lot of backstory to do.
Well, we're going to talk about like the story in a bit, I think, but there is a lot to dig deep into. There is a lot of backstory, and there does seem to be up to 5 seasons that they're talking about. As for money, yeah, like Amazon makes a lot of it. I think they're fine, but what they do really need is people to move on to Prime, I think. And I think this is a big property that can do that. Like, look at Disney. They have their Marvel and Star Wars. You have, Netflix is just big on its own because a lot of people, like, it was sort of the first one, right? And really setting the stage. And they've had breakout TV shows. Amazon, I don't know. Have they had a breakout show? I could just be
definitely. American Gods was pretty hot.
Yeah.
Marvelous Miss Maisel walked away with a
Miss
bunch
Maisel
of awards.
for sure. Yeah.
What else? What was the other one? Oh, The Boys.
Yeah.
The Boys. Yeah. So yeah, they're definitely doing. They're definitely hitting some high notes for sure, as far as the Amazon Prime platform goes. But as far as this budget goes, man, let's talk about what this means in terms of like production value. This is going to be crazy.
Yeah.
It's going to be like watching a film at home. Like every episode is going to be like a feature length film. That's how crazy this is going to be.
If I'm being honest, I'm probably more excited for this than any Marvel show. If I'm being honest.
Well,
sorry, Frank, but
no, I'm getting there. I really am, like, because I played the Shadow of Mordor video games and I got really into them, and the story is kind of nuts. Like, you're basically like this half alive, half dead dude, and you have the powers of the dead, and you have the power. It's insane.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool like mystical stuff that happens in the Lord of the Rings series.
Yeah, and this is one fantasy franchise that you can say is epic. Like epic on a level beyond epic.
And it's definitely
There's
one
like
of those
thousands
things, Frank,
and thousands
where
of years
they're
of history.
gonna talk about the lines between good and bad and like those gray areas in between and all that. So you're gonna get your fill of like morality.
Well, see, that's the thing. One of the biggest criticisms of Tolkien's work is he's too simplistic with good and bad. His characters have always been kind of polarized. There's never been really anybody
they struggle
in the middle.
With their journey and like staying on the good side if they're on the good side.
I would say the only character that really
Boromir.
struggled was Boromir.
Boromir
struggled
Yeah.
when he carried near the ring.
Yeah, but there was also Gollum, and then even Frodo had his own kind of like missteps along the way. So
true.
Yeah.
You make a good point about Gollum, because Gollum did, like, he was almost rehabilitated before he kind of lost his shit again.
He was consumed by the power of this, by power, basically. That's like that was a big thing for me. I don't know. I was like fascinated by the character of Gollum to the point where he became this like wretched creature kind of thing. But yeah.
I remember when Gollum came out, it was around the same time that Dobby from Harry Potter was like also a thing. I don't know if you guys remember this, but I just remember those two like were coming out at the same time, and it was like this new CG thing. People were like, "That's crazy." Although Andy Serkis's work as Gollum was just crazy insane.
Well, there's a Disney movie called The Black Cauldron, and apparently there's a character called Gungi, and it's like this little furry guy, and apparently his voice, his delivery is a lot like Andy Serkis's Gollum. Apparently,
I've watched that movie. It's like with a bat. It's a little bat or something, isn't it?
No, he's like a half dog, half bear, half something. I don't know, but people say that Gungi kind of reminds them of Andy Serkis's Gollum, and Black Cauldron came before the trilogy. So, but who knows? I guess you can make a comparison. Anyway.
Well, the movie came before, but I think the books came before this movie, probably.
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course. Yeah. But we're talking about voice work. We're talking about actual screen work. So, right. Yeah. So going back to this budget, one of the best things I loved about Peter Jackson's franchise was just the size and the scale of the action sequences.
Mm-hmm.
The Two Towers is, as far as action goes, is one of my favorite films of all time.
Oh, the Battles of Battle of Helm's Deep is just amazing.
Insane, right? All those people and all that makeup, all those people and all that armor, all those people just all those people,
All those people.
right?
Can I tell you something
Like-
funny? A fun fact. You guys may already know this, but apparently the riders of Rohan, a lot of them were actually females because there was a female like riding group, and they would just put like fake facial hair on a lot of these riders, just because, you know what I mean? Like, you need these people. But I remember it must have been like a behind the scenes clip or something I saw, but I always remember that because I always thought it was funny.
That's cool. I bet Carl Urban was in heaven, surrounded by.
I
all
didn't
these,
realize that
horse
was
riding
Carl Urban
chicks.
until so much after.
Really?
Oh no, because I was so
Really?
young too when those movies came out, and then later on I knew him as like an actor and other things, and it wasn't until
love
like I would
Carl
say
Urban.
this year that I realized they were the same person.
I've liked Carl Urban since him and Bruce Willis fought in that Red sequel. That was insane. That fight between him and Bruce Willis was crazy. And now he's in The Boys, and he's just so good. But yeah, no, like, I'm picturing the Second Age, and I'm thinking about how large these battles could get, and my brain is just exploding right now.
Yeah.
Like, just thinking about it, you know.
Frank, if you want, we can do a little recap. Like, I could do a quick recap of like what the Second Age as opposed to the First Age, or whatever these ages actually mean.
Sure, you got a little Coles Notes version you can do?
Yeah,
for everybody
real quick
listening?
Cole's note, but top of my head. So when we see Lord of the Rings, that trilogy, that is taking place in the Third Age. So it's after, you know, all the crazy stuff with Sauron, the very opening of the Fellowship of the Ring, where we see that battle with Isildur and he'll be like, "Oh, think I'll keep the ring," when Elrond's telling him like, "Don't be a fool, man." He doesn't say that exactly. That's my version of him saying it. That's the end of the Second Age, is what we're seeing. If we go back to like the First Age, that's like very much about this battle between the Sky Malcor, or some people call him Morgath. And if you read the Silmarillion, it covers that. And actually Sauron is one of the henchmen of Malcor inside the First Age. And it's really like the elves and the humans battling this dark lord. The end of the First Age ends with this, you know, epic battle, as, you know, Lord of the Rings, you know, does. And it goes on and moves to the Second Age. And the Second Age is what we're covering. So Sauron is around. He becomes a new Dark Lord, but he's biding his time at the beginning. And I think one of the first things that kind of happens in the Second Age, or one of the most important places in the Second Age, actually, if I'm saying that correctly, is this town called Numenor. Yeah, I'm so bad at saying it. Numenor, which is this, you know, this island kingdom that's supposed to kind of represent like Atlantis. I think it's supposed to be the idea behind, but the building of that, and Sauron sort of biding his time and doing whatever he's doing. And the Second Age takes like, you know, it's like 1,000 years of stuff happening. And there's a lot in there. Like, we could deep dive into the Second Age and we can talk about different things, but there's so much shit that goes down.
This is why I want it to be a graphic novel, because the scale of this thing is just crazy. Like, so we're going to get into some of the characters that we suspect are going to be in the series as we go through this episode. We're going to talk about the casting. We're going to talk about pretty much everything that we know about this series right now. And thanks to Saba for giving us a rundown out there.
Mhm.
I know there's some Tolkien hardcore that's going to like add us on Instagram and be like, "You got this wrong. You got that wrong. Blah, 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 blah." So just save it.
Yeah, I'm
We're
definitely not saying I'm a complete expert. I haven't read the trilogy since
Nobody
middle
is,
school,
dude.
but I
Yeah.
am a big fan of this world. So yeah, let us know if we did call out something wrong. But yeah, I think that pretty much sums up very high level the First, Second, and Third Age in reverse.
I did read a funny quote from a critic of the Silmarillion, and he called it the stillborn child of the Lord of the Rings. I'm
Oh,
like, that's
man.
pretty terrible.
That's such a horrible
That's
way
pretty
of
hardcore.
describing
it was-
something.
That was
That's pretty
dark.
hardcore. That guy probably doesn't like Don Quixote either.
Yeah, no. So
what
that was
are
like super dark. I don't know.
what
I
can
never
you do?
read it, but I don't think I will now.
Okay, so along with these amazing budgets, and along with, you know, going back and using New Zealand as this epic backdrop, they got a hell of a creative team on board for this thing. So they got the main director is going to be Juan Antonio Bayona, who has done Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom. He's worked on The Orphanage and The Impossible. He's directing the first 2 episodes, and he's also serving as executive producer.
Okay.
And he's got a little quote here too. J.R.R. Tolkien created one of the most extraordinary, inspiring stories of all time. As a lifelong fan, it is an honor and a joy to join this amazing team. I can't wait to take audiences around the world to Middle-earth and have them discover the wonders of the Second Age with a never-before-seen story. Sorry, guys, I had a brain fart in the middle of reading that. And then there's a familiar name here from the world of Game of Thrones, Brian Cogbin, who's done some writing for GOT and has worked as an assistant to Benioff and Weiss. He wrote like 11 episodes, I think, in Game of Thrones. And I think he was in the last 2 seasons of the show. I think he got promoted to EP or co-EP. And he's also attached to write the live action version of The Sword and the Stone, which I cannot wait for. That's going to be awesome. I just hope they cut some of the music because the music's kind of crappy in The Sword of the Stone. And then the showrunners are, I think I already said this, J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay. They're doing the day-to-day duties as showrunners, and they were on the project since July 2018. So they've been on it for a while because they were working with the actual Tolkien estate, because the Tolkien estate has approval over everything, apparently. Like everything has to be run by the Tolkien estate before it gets greenlighted. So casting, characters, story, music, like everything has to go past the Tolkien estate. And apparently one of them was involved in Star Trek Beyond. I won't hold that against them. So,
I really did not enjoy that movie.
No. I don't think a lot of people did.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people did. Into Darkness was so much better.
I can't remember the difference between the 2 Star Trek films, but I thought they were okay. But obviously the show is better than either film.
The first movie was good. The second one, I was like, oh, okay. And the third, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think I watched the third one. I didn't know there was a third one.
Yeah.
So the writing team is rounded out by Jennifer Hutchinson from Breaking Bad, Jason Cahill from The Sopranos, and I think he was on a couple other. I read that he was on a couple sci-fi programs. Justin Dobble from Stranger Things, Brian Cogman I already mentioned, Stephanie Folsom from Toy Story 4. I don't know how that translates. He's probably done a whole bunch of other stuff anyways. Helen Shang from Hannibal, and the writing consultant is Glenise Mullins. And then they've got a Tolkien advisor consultant that is pretty well known to everybody in the Tolkien world, apparently, or the Tolkien fan base. He's going to be kind of overseeing everything. So
nice.
It sounds like they got a pretty wide team, a good mix of women, a good mix of guys, a good mix of people of color. So this should be interesting.
Wow, imagine being so into fandom that you can consult on it. That's pretty cool.
I mean, if you look at Star Wars, I think that's exactly what that's what Dave Filoni basically is for Star Wars, isn't he?
Yeah.
I thought Saba was going to say that's what Frank should be doing.
Oh, that's on Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Okay. I was like, sorry, man. I don't think Lord of the Rings is
Yeah,
but
honest,
I don't think I could
do you spend your time like in charge of a fan club or something? I feel like those are the people that would get the consultant jobs. They have to like be a moderator of a forum or something.
And you have to have suspenders like George R.R. Martin and wear one of those hats. Yeah. That's the measuring stick. So as we were saying during Saba's synopsis of the Second Age, there's a lot of stuff that's going to be happening around Numenor.
Yeah.
And like you said, Numenor is this ancient kingdom. They are men, but they have longer lifespans, apparently. And this place is apparently like super majestic and beautiful, amazing and idyllic. And then Sauron shows up and basically knocks the place to shit.
But a lot happens in the middle before it even gets that. Also a funny thing, or a thing to sort of relate to the Third Age, Aragorn, descends from Numenor, which is why he lives so long. I think like inside the Fellowship, he's like 80 or something, like 80. Oh, wait, let me get the right age. I don't want to get this wrong. 87 or something like that.
Yeah, he died at 280.
Yeah.
That was,
So that's where they descend from. But yeah, it's really, so after the end of the First Age and that battle, a lot of people are going deeper into Middle Earth to, find places to live. And build a life there. And so Elrond and his people, they end up kind of going and settling to Middle Earth, what we know now. But there was this Numenor that I think Elrond's brother Elros went there.
Was the first king of Numenor.
Yeah, and he chose to be immortal.
Yes.
Which is interesting.
This is the story I want to see. This is the story I want to see. I want to see these two kids make up their minds as to whether they want to be immortals or whether they want to be man. That is insane. I have to see this. Sorry, Saba.
No, for sure. That story in itself is insane. But one thing that happens, so Numenor does have to build. Like I think what we will see is this building, right? Because it takes a long time. But I don't think the first season is going to show Sauron or talk about him explicitly. I think we're going to see him in and out because he is the big bad. He is biding his time. After Melkor falls, he's supposed to go back and repent and everything else, but he escapes away and was slowly waiting for the right time to strike. And we're going to see Sauron in a way we've never seen him before as well. When we see him in that like big sort of armor and he looks kind of larger alive. And it's really hard to humanize a person like that. That's what you were saying with the simplicity of these stories. There's good and bad. It's very easy to see Sauron. He's like, that's a bad guy. Like, look at him. He looks like a bad guy. We're going to see a very different Sauron in this series, I think, but I don't think we'll see much of him first season. I do think it'll be a lot of that building of, what happened, sort of surviving from the first age.
Yeah. So you mentioned the whole thing about them kind of migrating out from Numenor once it's destroyed, right? And they do establish Gondor and I think another town of men. I can't remember what it's called, or another kingdom of men. I can't remember what it's called, but so that's King Elendil that establishes that. And apparently King Elendil is like 8 feet tall. Like the Numenorians are apparently like the perfect basketball team.
Yeah.
They're just all gigantic dudes. Like, so they're gonna have to go they're gonna have to go get John Krasinski's family to play them. Yeah. Apparently.
No, that's I think the other kingdom they established is like Arnor or something like that.
Arnor, that's it. Arnor. Yeah. I thought it began with a V. Why did I think it began with a V?
I mean, there's a lot.
So one of the things that the official Instagram account and Twitter account of the show did to kind of fuck with the fan base was they started releasing maps. I don't know if you guys caught that.
Yeah, I did. Tolkien started drawing them.
Yeah, no, but for yes.
Sorry,
yeah,
not
he
Tolkien,
drew them.
But yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, he drew them like they already existed.
Yeah.
But the Amazon people started releasing them in like pieces, and then like every once in a while they would add a name to a territory or like to an ocean or whatever. So apparently they were like drip feeding that forever. And there's an older ancient name for the kingdom of Rohan apparently used in this map. So one of the things that one of the hardcore Tolkien guys like pointed out is that where Gondor should be, Gondor isn't there. Because like they're saying that if this is the second age, Gondor should be there. So it's casting doubt in the Tolkien fan base that they're trying to like they're trying to use this particular piece of information to kind of nail down exactly when the story is going to take place.
Well, actually, Gondor does not, I think, come to existence until the last 200 years of the Second Age.
Oh yeah,
it's
okay.
like it's not till the near end of it. That happens after they have to leave Numenor, that Gondor and Anor are established. So that makes me think that they're going right at the like this could be starting off right at the end of the first age. And if it makes sense if they're planning 5 seasons at least, I think that they're going to be spanning like 1,000 years, which might mean we're going to see characters change in and out per season. Unless you're an elf, then you'll be in every season.
I think that's a good idea. I think they should snapshot certain points in time instead of trying to tell us like this straight linear story. Like that's what I kind of think they should do. Like what I want to see is I want to see them chronicle the major events that ultimately lead up to the creation of the Rings of Power or the rings and the Ring of Power. That's what I want to see. I think that would be amazing. I think that would be awesome because you would get characters that are familiar to us. because we got to see that prologue scene in the movies, and for you guys read the books, you guys know who Elrond and Elros is and all that shit. So I think that would be really dope to kind of have. I think that would really make it identifiable and familiar and fun. The only concern I have though is that they're going to be reliant on story points that a lot of people already know. Like, for instance, and we'll talk about this more when we get into the characters, but when Sauron created the Ring of Power, before Sauron created the Ring of Power, he took on the form of another elf and basically went and manipulated, what's his name? Calibor? Is it Calibor?
Yeah. He manipulated him. Elrond, I think, kind of saw through it, but didn't know it was Sauron.
Yeah, he didn't know it was Sauron, but he did not trust him. Yeah, Galadriel and Elrond did not trust this guy. Celebrimbor, that's his name. So Celebrimbor was the smith. He was the elf smith, and he had to make the rings for the 7 for the dwarves, the 9 for the men, the 3 for the elves. And apparently this Sauron in this visage, this false visage, like, used his powers to manipulate Celebrimbor into doing it in a way that, I'm using layman's terms here, folks, but like the recipe, like the actual makeup of the ring could be manipulated once Sauron made the one ring, the Ring of Power. So I want to see that story. I want to see the deception. I want to see, because that's so Game of Thrones, deception and just all these kind of circumventing, manipulative games. I love that kind of shit. So I really want to see
not only
that.
that, just seeing Sauron in that, it's almost like he's a trickster when he's Anatar. Like, that's what he is. He goes in there, and they even describe him as being like very handsome, and so people are, and fair and all that. So I think for sure they're gonna portray that story. The only thing is that doesn't happen again till later. Like the first 500 years to 1,000 years of the Second Age, like Sauron's like pretty quiet, like he's just like doing whatever. But that area, that time that you're talking about, I think will be really interesting, and they're for sure gonna cover it because we're gonna get into casting. But like they've casted people to play like a young Galadriel, I think, right? And I don't know if there's a young Elrond yet, but I'm sure they have cast that if they're already like 2 episodes in.
I actually read a good rumor that's going to maybe support the idea that there's actually going to be one actor playing both Elros and Elrond.
Ooh.
Kind of along the lines of like Tatiana Maslany and the Orphan Black sisters. So let's talk about casting, let's talk about the characters and let's get into casting. So the characters that I suspect are going to be in this show are based on the research that I've been able to do. And again, I'm not some Tolkien expert, so don't tear my head off. Sabo will probably correct me, so it's good to have her here. So the first one that jumps out at me is King Elendil. He's one of the exiles of Numenor. He's the founder of the kingdom of Arnor and Gondor, and he was the first High King of the Dunedain. And the Dunedain were the race of men that Aragorn was a part of that had this extended lifespan, and they were incredibly proficient with bows and arrows and swords, and they were rock stars. They were the rangers of the forest. So I think that we're going to see they're so hard to pronounce. Like, Tolkien was obsessed with Beowulf, so he gives all of his characters names that are like right out of Beowulf, or like cross between Welsh.
He created a whole language, and
I know.
The person you mentioned who was hired to do the consulting, he actually was studying Tolkien's linguistics, like the whole language that he created in Lord of the Rings.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
Crazy.
awesome.
And
that is definitely not the same as studying Klingon, folks. Okay. I know people think that Klingon is really cool and it's awesome that Star Trek has its own language, but Tolkien was on another level, dude.
Yeah.
Another level.
I do agree with you, though. I do think that Elendil will be in there only because, and I think maybe later in the show, because Isildur is a son, and same with Anarion, who is, I think, the first king of Gondor, if I'm not mistaken. That I might be wrong on, but yeah, his 2 sons, at least his one son, is monumental inside, that final battle. which is the end of the Second Age, which is the Battle of Sauron. So I agree with you there. I think we'll see him. One rumor I heard or something I kind of saw floating around is the possible Gandalf being in the story, only because Gandalf would be alive in the Second Age. He's very old, and apparently he was a guest on the Graham Norton show or the radio show. And Graham was saying, like, would it be annoying to have another, wizard around, like, because you're like Gandalf and everyone knows you as that. And he's like, oh, well, what do you mean another Gandalf? Kind of hinting that, like, oh, I could be it, but I don't think there's anything official in that. So far, none of the other actors who were in the trilogy seem to be in the series, although they've kind of given its support for the most part. I don't think everyone gave it support, but I think for the most part they did. But that was a fun rumor.
Ian McKellen definitely wants to come back and play that role again. He's been he apparently he's been vocal about it, and the Tolkien purists are like all over it. Like they're like Gandalf, Ian McKellen. But there are a lot of Tolkien purists that are just like, no, you can't do it because he wasn't a part of the Second Age. He was apparently somewhere else, and so was Saruman apparently too. So the wizards that that we know, that we're familiar with, apparently they weren't around in Middle Earth at this point in time. So I don't know if that's true, but that's what I'm getting from Tolkien purists who are on YouTube and Twitter and all that shit. So, dude, again, the scope of this knowledge is beyond any other fandom I've ever encountered. Okay, so we're trying to be accurate, but goddamn, this is like one of the biggest universes ever.
I also read that Tolkien never established Legolas's date of birth or whatever, so it's like a debate about whether he was born kind of near the end of the Second Age or the beginning of the Third Age, so they could probably get away with like sticking him in there.
That could be cool. And Orlando Bloom has been on an Amazon program.
The only thing is he would have to be like younger, and he's older now, so
oh, true.
Also, I think he did say that he's like, I like coming back for The Hobbit, but I don't really see myself coming back for that. I'm pretty sure he said something along the lines of that, like more of like a good luck to you guys kind of thing. We might see some Legolas. I mean, I remember I got into a fight with my cousin over Legolas about who liked him more. I don't know. It was very dumb. We were very young. But it was
the girls went bananas for that
vivid
dude,
fight.
Man. The girls went bananas for that dude.
Yeah.
And I'd be excited to see the story that comes around from is leading up to Isildur cutting the finger off of Sauron's hand, and then also like not throwing it into the fire. He was instructed to throw it in the fire, and he didn't, and that's why the ring still existed in the first place. So
yeah, Mount Doom, right? Yeah.
But I honestly, guys, I don't think it's gonna get to that until like the last season.
Oh, that sounds like the last season of the show.
Like that final battle would be like probably like the last season.
Yeah. You think so? Yeah.
Well, because that's the end of the Second Age. Like the Third Age starts like right after that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then so you mentioned an Aryan, which is Elendil's other son, and maybe he was the king of Gondor. I'm not sure. But the other character that I read was Gilglad. I don't know, another name I cannot pronounce. Apparently he's an elf. He was the High King of Noldor. Ring a bell, Saba?
Sorry, what was his name again?
Gilglad?
Oh.
Or Gilglad? It's like Gilglad.
Okay, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, this is, what we're all going to have to do, guys, is we're all going to have to deep dive and read on this again, because it's been a while.
Okay.
But
well, apparently he's the High King of Noldor when the Second Age is in full swing, and he's an elf king. So apparently he could potentially be a large part of the story. And then obviously we have Elrond, which was amazingly portrayed by the great Hugo Weaving. Love Hugo Weaving. So good. He's the Lord of Rivendell. He's half man, elf, possessor of one of the rings of elves, and he chose to be immortal. He chose to be elvish when his brother Elros chose to be chose to be mortal.
Yeah.
With a really long life.
I know they live so long, those guys. And really interesting things as well is that we'll start seeing like the interconnections, I think, of some of these characters we don't know much about. Like we'll see, I'm assuming, a lot more of Elrond. Elrond seemed like the the voice of reason of some sense inside the trilogies, right? But seeing that character build up, even learning more about Galadriel, who has like a very intense background. One thing I want to really learn more about, which I don't know if we will, is that so at the end of the First Age, after they defeat Melkor, a lot of the elves go out west to that land, that magical land or whatever it is. And some of the elves stay. And in the end of the trilogy of the Return of the King, that's where Frodo and Bilbo go. I don't know if this will cover this at all, but I just want to be like, yo, what is up with that place? Is that just death?
Yeah,
like you're
I want
just
to see some of that
death?
shit too, dude. Yeah, I want to see some of that shit too. It's got to be like, I don't know. I think maybe you get there and it's like club med, like just
because like why doesn't everyone just go there?
Swim up bars and unlimited margaritas and
the vacation spot.
Totally. But by the way, I pronounced the name wrong for the king of Noldor. It's Gil-galad. So it's Gilgalad. He's the Elven king, and apparently, Tolkien intended for Galadriel to be one of the greatest elves in all of Middle Earth. That was his design for her. Apparently, she was supposed to be the most beautiful, the most knowledgeable, and the most powerful, and that's why he gave her one of those rings, the Nenya ring. Again, him and fucking Beowulf, insane, dude, insane. So I want to talk about Sauron because we kind of touched on him a little bit, but like I like this story about him being Anatar, who's this like this false identity that he assumes with like Celebrimbor to get the rings made. I'm hooked on this story. I want to see it play out. I want to see every little beat. I feel like so when I hear this story with Anatar, it flashes back to Palpatine, right? Doesn't it sound like Palpatine?
Oh yes, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure the writers of Star Wars could have been reading Lord of the Rings too.
Good point. And you know what? George Lucas was definitely reading Lord of the Rings. 100%. 100%. But it sounds like Palpatine because, and to be honest with you, I think that's the best part of the entire prequel trilogy is watching Palpatine work. Watching him pull all these little puppets, pulling the strings of the marionettes, just making them do what he wants them to do. Well, it didn't matter what it was, shut down the government, start a war, kill Jedi younglings. Like, dude, it's I love seeing people with that kind of power over other people. I don't like relish in it, obviously, but it's psychologically fascinating. Like, and I've always been a study of like the human, like the way that humans make decisions. Like that's always been something fascinating.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the whole sort of Palpatine thing, because he does kind of do something similar so he ends up going to Numenor as a prisoner, right? And he's there as a prisoner because he knows that.
Oh, he's there as a prisoner. Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Well, yeah. So he goes to the Numenor because he knows that he can't really defeat it. So what he does is he goes there as a hostage, but he ends up working his way up and people being charmed. Like he keeps like charming people, and he ends up becoming an advisor there. And he's one of the reasons that Numenor falls. I think he knows that they can't defeat it in battle or wherever they are. So in terms of like, how many orcs or whatever else he has, I don't know at this point how much of his army that he has, but he does this whole thing, which is, as Anatar, becoming this hostage. So, and playing, I think, the politics of it all to becoming an advisor.
That's dope. I can't wait to see that. If that's going to be like we get to see that, that's awesome. Okay. So let's talk casting, because the casting is being met with both praise and a lot of contempt. And I'm sure you can assume why there's contempt, because we live in the age of assholes. So, yeah. So let's start with someone who's very familiar to us, Robert Aramayo, who was young Ned Stark in Game of Thrones. So rumor is Robert is going to be playing Elrond and what's his brother's name? Not Eros. What's his name?
Elros?
Elros. That's it. Elros.
Oh, he's playing
Elrond.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the rumor. That's the rumor, because everybody's looking at his face and they're going, okay, this could be a young Hugo Weaving. This could be a young one. Who knows? Okay. And then we've got Owain Arthur. So he's a pretty popular Welsh actor. Not really a lot about him. He hasn't really been in anything that's of note to probably our listener base, unless we're talking to people who live in Wales and go to the theater. So really not a lot to go off of. Can't really tell who he would play. He's kind of got he's a pretty stocky dude, so maybe he's going to be like some sort of warrior or whatever. And then here's the one that threw me for a loop. Probably one of my all-time TV crushes of all time. Did I say all time like 3 times?
Yes, you said it twice.
Okay, probably one of my biggest crushes. Nazanin Boniadi. She was on Homeland. So people are speculating because she's Persian, maybe she's part of the Hera Dream. I don't know. Honestly, when I was reading the comments on the official Lord of the Rings Instagram where they were posting the cast members, there's a lot of blowback for the people of color. It's kind of bullshit. You know, I get people's idea that, you know, Tolkien's universe was an all white kind of universe, right? But at the end of the day, I think that's kind of fucked up in today's age. I think that if Tolkien was doing mushrooms now and writing his books now, I think he would include people of color.
Yeah, I think so too.
Like he doesn't strike me as a racist. Like he doesn't strike me as anybody who would preclude people of color to tell his stories. So I just think it's a frame of reference thing. You know, he grew up in a small English town, and you know, he grew up in England, for fuck's sakes. So the only people he ever heard about, you know, grabbing swords and being wizards and shit were white people. But
I'm sure
that's
there
all
will be
changed now.
characters that they cast as people of color. I can't see them making something on this scale and not casting people of color this day and age. So,
well, that's the thing, though. That's why people are saying that she's going to be part of the Haradrim, because the Haradrim is they're literally kind of modeled after Middle Eastern. You know, they actually have a name of what one of their sects or one of their subgroups is actually called the Hashin, which is more or less like the what they used to call assassins back in Afghanistan back in the old days. So
yeah, I think those naysayers can just keep on, because they're not going to. They obviously have not changed the times. I mean, Christina says, in this day and age, creating a story like that, especially if you're, you know, traversing an entire world, you know, it just makes sense. There's a really great show on Netflix called The Dragon Prince, and there's elves in it, and there's elves of like different backgrounds and everything, and it's so amazingly done, and it's so cool. And I thought about Lord of the Rings when watching it, because, you know, in Lord of the Rings, you know, they were all white. I mean, it was what it was, whatever. I enjoyed those movies quite a bit. But, like, you know, if they're tackling it now, there's really no reason. I don't really see any reason that it really matters. Yeah. I
don't think it matters at all. Like I really don't. You know, I think that, again, I just think if Tolkien again was writing his books now and doing his mushrooms, I don't see why he wouldn't include people of color in different positions than, say, the bad guys, right? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I just think it's a frame of reference. I can see people making an issue out of it, but it's a non-issue.
But they're definitely people making an issue out of it, but they're idiots, so no problem there. Okay, so the next one up is Tom Budge. Tom Budge. Okay, he looks like I have one photo open of him, and he's got like his hand like in this position that looks like he's gonna cast a spell on somebody. So that's like perfect. So maybe a wizard, maybe something along those lines. But here's the one we really wanted to talk about. So Morfydd Clark, she's a Welsh actress, and apparently she's rumored to be playing Galadriel. So apparently if you take a look at her, she could pass for a young Cate Blanchett.
That's awesome. That's really
Yeah.
cool. I'm excited. I mean, those are characters. So, like I said, I do think that we will see like characters changing as they traverse through the second age, just because of depending on where the story goes. But I do, there are going to be those constants, which are, you know, those elven characters will probably, for the most part, stay very constant throughout, you know, the
Yeah.
whole second age.
Yeah, and they
Apparently,
have
she was
to-
also in Pride and Prejudice Zombies. Saba, did you ever watch
Yes, she
that?
was.
No, I did not
never.
watch
I
it.
actually heard it was
Never.
good, so I'm curious about this.
See that, you know, the what do you call it? Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer and Pride and Prejudice Zombies, and there's another one. Like, where did he come up with these freaking ideas?
It was
Like,
actually someone wrote it. That was a book, and then it was, I think, supposed to be a little
Yeah,
bit
it was a
tongue in
book.
cheek and like a joke, and then somebody made a movie off of it.
oh, okay. So along with Morphet Clark, we've got Ismael Cruz Cordova, who apparently was on Ray Donovan at one point, and he also played. He played. You remember in Mandalorian, the jailbreak episode?
Yeah.
The guy that got break what's that race called? Damn, I can't remember. Anyways, the guy that got broken out of jail in the Mandalorian in that episode, The Prisoner,
Mhm.
that's this guy, Ismael Cruz Cordova. So there's Emma Horvath. People are speculating that she would make a perfect elf. Maybe she would. Markella Kavanaugh, Joseph Mall. Now, Joseph Mall is interesting because he played Benjen Stark on Game of Thrones.
Oh, cool.
And people are speculating that he's going to be Sauron. Like, people are thinking that he's going to be the main villain. That's kind of where they're sitting with that. And then there's a young, like, this guy's probably this actor is probably 12 years old. His name is Tyro Muhafidian, and he's like a kid actor. So maybe a hobbit, maybe a little person. I don't know. And Sophia Nomvet, Megan Richards, Dylan Smith, Charlie Vickers, Daniel Wayman, and Maxim Baldry. Those are all the confirmed castings for the show. So if you want to go back and, you know, take a look at their IMDb's and see what they've been in, some of them have been in some pretty impressive stuff. Obviously, Joseph Mawley is pretty interesting because he played Benjen, and being speculated to be the big bad. So could be cool to take a look at him. So one of the things I read about this series is that they have an intimacy consultant on the show.
Yeah.
That I found fascinating.
Jennifer Ward Leyland, who is apparently well respected in making sure that everyone's comfortable during nude scenes. So,
yes. I don't like that. No, I'm a big fan of Game of Thrones. You know, whatever they did, not always made sense to me, but made sense sort of in line with the books and everything else. For this world of Lord of the Rings as classical high fantasy, it really doesn't, you know?
You don't want to see people bang?
That's not why people are watching. Like, I hope is the thing.
No, I know, but it's part of.
No, I understand it's part of that.
Go ahead.
That I completely understand. Like that, yeah. But I'm saying a classical Lord of the Rings story is not that. Like, high fantasy is not. That's my thing. I really get annoyed when people put, you know, those, and HBO does this a lot, where they kind of put those things in for like shock factor sometimes. I think sometimes, you know, there are nudity scenes that are like completely granted, and some I find very beautiful. There was a few of Daenerys near the end that I thought were very beautifully done. But I really just don't, I hope they're not like, you know, completely sexing it up for like no reason, because that's just not what Lord of the Rings really is.
So apparently there was an open casting call for background extras who are comfortable with nudity.
Oh, damn, it's an orgy.
Oh, man, I'm done with this show already.
And then I'm reading this online on a website called theownering.net, and they were saying, just how many naked extras do you need for a classy romantic lovemaking scene?
I'm not excited. That made me like not excited about this show at all.
That's an orgy. That's definitely the brothel.
I hope that it's just in like small. I hope they do it a little bit here and there. I don't want to see it in like every episode.
Yeah, not like in GOT. Yeah.
Like, listen, I'm, a pretty big fan of Game of Thrones, and I have been for a long time, and I really enjoyed the series. And I think for the most part, a lot of the decisions made sense. I mean, every now and then I was like, oh, there's not really a need for that, but whatever. But with Lord of the Rings, that is just not what it is. I'm not saying it has to be completely PG rated kind of thing, but I will be really taken aback if they sort of, follow that same vibe. It's really not the type of show that I would be picturing then, or at least like when we're looking at like the high fantasy aspect of it, yeah, I would.
Yeah, I find Tolkien's fantasy writing to be a lot more classy, and I think a lot of other fantasy writers are just like downright vulgar, and they make like a lot of so I think his writing stood out for that. Like he really focused on the story and the world building instead of using up pages for all like these long sex scenes that don't like take you anywhere. So
Okay, so let's talk about the comparison to Game of Thrones and the Lord of the Rings franchise. So, okay, the way I see it is George R.R. Martin obviously loves Tolkien's work, right? And he's obviously taken a lot of inspiration from that. But what I think he's also done is he's blended a lot of real old England into Game of Thrones, right? There's brothels. The language is very, very colloquial. It's not necessarily the high language of Lord of the Rings. It's not necessarily, it's not necessarily refined. It's more of a, you kind of meet characters that are a little bit more refined than others, a little bit more regal than others. But then you have other characters that are basically like, street bums. There's not really a lot of refinement to them. So I think that Martin did a good job of blending those two worlds, giving everybody the high fantasy that they want, but also giving them something a little bit more identifiable and relatable, in the context of it's hard to say modern, but it's something that was more just relatable.
It resembles like what could have been. For sure.
Yeah.
Like Peter Baelish, owned that brothel. Like, that 100%, it was seedier, I would say, as well. And it was representing like the time, I think, of the War of the Roses. And part of what George R. R. Martin was trying to do as well was kind of break some of the formula that Tolkien had, which was, this classical hero and this classical villain. They kind of turn that a bit on its head, you would say. But as you were saying, Tolkien, I feel like is a different... is that classic high fantasy.
Yeah, I think so too. But the thing is that Amazon wants their Game of Thrones. That's without a doubt why they bought this property.
Yeah.
They want their Game of Thrones. They want that program that is going to help them get their platform to the next level. And honestly, I don't know if they can do that without TNA. It's something that people kind of expect when they turn on an adult streaming service, like
I don't even
when
know
they turn
what
adult
TNA
programming
means.
on a streaming service. Tits and ass.
Oh, that's a weird acronym.
You've never heard TNA before?
I don't think so. But I don't know if that's completely true. So if we think about a show that really broke boundaries, and it's the number one, I think, short series watched on Netflix just this last week was The Queen's Gambit, which is an amazing 7-episode series.
I love that show.
Oh,
I binge watched the whole thing.
Yeah. Like I just don't, here's the thing. I haven't seen Tolkien, like I haven't seen this show yet. So it could actually be done in a really great way. It could just, be something that's in the story. So I don't want to I kind of jumped the gun when I first heard it. It could be done in a way that makes sense and everything else.
Right.
But if they do go for that Game of Thrones kind of thing, I do think a lot of the fans will see it for what it is, which is a gimmick, That's my thing.
Yeah, but
that turns me off of watching it right away.
Yeah, and you have every right to feel that way. But I also think that the writers have done a lot of research, and I think that they've found a lot of fan fiction where they have a lot of characters having sex, and it's probably going to influence a lot of what they do. I just kind of feel like sex between characters that we just don't have in our world is something that's fascinating to other people. And I definitely think they're going to lean hard into some elves being gay, because that's just,
I mean, that's just,
you
that
know,
makes sense. I
Well,
mean,
Amazon
Yeah.
already did something like that too in American Gods. They did a gay sex scene and it worked for
Yeah.
what it was. I believe that was also in the book, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
But yeah, it was
between,
like a really explicit, like detailed gay sex scene.
Yeah.
So they've
I mean,
done it.
yeah, it was
and I think they could do it again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it makes sense for like the LGBTQ community to be represented. I mean, in terms of, you know, like you were saying before, like there not being people of color, it just doesn't make sense. Like that also doesn't make sense
Yep.
either.
Yep.
If you're covering a world that vast, and I would imagine, like for the most part, elves don't really have issues, I think, with that sort of idea.
Yeah.
I have nothing really against that. It's just, you know, it's more of the genre of what, you know, Lord of the Rings is. That I feel like it wouldn't make sense. Like, don't make it a Game of Thrones because it's not a Game of Thrones. If you're trying to do a copy of something, it's not going to work. It needs to be its own thing. And you know, I'm gonna wait and see, and you know, and I probably will start watching it. But if I do find it's becoming gimmicky in that sense, and they're just doing things for
Yeah.
the sake of doing it, that really turns me off watching a show.
I hear you. Well, I'll say my experience with the Lord of the Rings franchise, especially with the elf characters. There's a way that they look at each other that they're just all down in the clown. Like it's just like everybody going everywhere. There's no, like, I almost feel like if there was going to be a queer race that just wanted to be with whoever they wanted, or a pansexual race, it would be the elves.
Oh, for sure.
Because like
yeah.
the way that they look at each other, like it didn't matter whether it was a guy, it was a girl, it didn't matter. They like the looks on
I don't know
their
who you're
faces.
talking. Like I know
I don't
Elrond.
either.
I'm trying to think of who's
Okay.
looking at each other, but they do
Well,
have
I
very
remember
passionate
Frank only
looks.
saw the movie, so there was apparently all this flirtation that he noticed.
Okay, not Elrond,
You're talking
but
about
the character that
Legolas?
Legolas, Lee Pace, the
Yeah,
character that Lee Pace played.
Legolas, I felt a bit, but I think that was just like Orlando Bloom in general.
I think it's just the way
That
they
I-
portrayed him. They made him really like elegant.
I'm sure I bet you
There's
there's
just-
so much.
Yeah.
There's so much
Yeah.
Legolas Aragorn fan fiction. I bet you. I've never looked up, but I'm sure there is.
Oh, for sure, dude. For sure.
Yeah,
And
I could definitely see them doing it too because all the characters are made up, so there's nothing really stopping them from going that way. And then
Yeah.
I'm also reading. Someone was talking about The Witcher and saying that there was sex in that. It was pretty explicit, but
tons of sex.
It wasn't
Holy
like
shit.
it didn't feel like Game of Thrones the way that they did the sex
No.
scenes in The Witcher,
Yeah, but
and
The
even just the
Witcher
show, The Witcher
had a-
doesn't feel like Game of Thrones. So
Yeah,
I
but
guess
Witcher
it could
was-
be done.
Oh, sorry, that's interrupting. But yeah, Witcher to me was just very campy. I had other issues
Yeah.
with it that were
Yeah, for sure. It definitely has its own issues, but I would agree that the sex scenes in that felt okay. They didn't make me really
No, there was-
uncomfortable or not want to watch the show anymore or anything
No,
like that.
there was one that didn't make me uncomfortable. It was just the most ridiculous one. It was like with him and the main girl, and they were just like rolling all over. I just remember a really weird one, but I haven't seen the show in forever. But I didn't maybe stop watching.
They were definitely
I-
gratuitous. Like they didn't need to be so long. They didn't need to be like a main part of the show. But yeah, but it didn't feel like Game of Thrones, I guess, was the point. So yeah, it was like they called it a playful wink wink kind of sex scene, which I think is true.
Well, I think that this series is definitely one, okay, like, and I'm sure Saba will be okay with this, but they're definitely going to dial up the violence. We're going to see more of that. I don't know if you guys have watched American Gods. I know, Christine,
I did.
I know
yeah.
you've watched The Boys. Oh, you did? Okay. The violence in American Gods, the violence in The Boys is a lot.
Yeah.
It's quite heavy. So I think that they're going to dial up the violence.
I mean,
in
it
this
is and
for
it
sure.
isn't. The violence is there, but there's a lot of story around it, so it's not just
Yeah.
it's not just
Yeah, I'm
there
not
for no
saying-
reason.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's gratuitous, but we've also saw quite a bit of violence in Game of Thrones. And I think when you're dealing with a story where a person's primary weapon is an axe or a sword or a bow and arrow, people are gonna fucking bleed, dude. That's just the way
Oh my
things
gosh,
are.
Yeah.
I feel like Lord of the Rings is my baby, and I'm like, I don't want them to see blood. I don't want them to know what sex is. It's like this weird feeling, because
Well,
I'm totally fine with it and everything else. But I'm like, Lord of the Rings.
So I was like, I want to go back to the time
that is
where
the thing.
I
Lord
didn't
of
know
the
what
Rings,
TNA
it
meant.
felt very like PG. The book, it was sort of like, I don't know, the Princess Bride kind of vibe or something in terms of the violence and the romance.
Yeah, but I guess it does
Yeah.
make sense, and we'll see when the show actually comes out how they do it. And they are running
Yeah.
everything. You said by the estate, and they have a lot of people on, and they've got their consultants, so I'm sure it will turn out fine. I just got a little freaked out, a little worried, but because I don't want it to be gimmicky. I just don't want them to put stuff in to watch it. If you
Yeah,
make
me
something
neither.
great, people will
Yeah.
watch.
Yeah, I agree. And I do want to see them explore real, like, human psyche aspects of existence.
Mhm.
Like, I do want to see them explore prejudice. I do want to see them I want to see them do it in the context of like that world, right? Because prejudice is actually like a real thing. The fear of other is a real thing. It's not something that relegates itself to a place and a time. It just doesn't, like, it doesn't live in a vacuum. It happens everywhere because we're all human. We're all fucked up. And if we don't know about something, then we tend to jump to conclusions, and we tend to have a bias before we're familiar and aware and have some sense of experience with something, and I do want to see those things explored in this context. I think that could be really cool. However, though, I don't want it to be like some SJW, like, kind of thing. Like, do it the right way. Don't give me girls screaming girl power in this movie. That's ridiculous. Just
Okay, that's
show
very
me
out
how.
of left field, Frank. There's nothing
I
about
don't-
girl power we're talking about.
No. But what I'm saying is, like, like, I love strong female characters. I just don't want to see anybody do like what you were saying about the sex, right? Like, if they're gonna do it, I want them to do it in the context of the world and in the show that they're in, right? Don't do anything that's like something you would see in a CW program. That's all I'm saying.
And I don't
Right.
see Amazon doing that. I haven't really seen them do
Yeah.
anything like that in any of the shows I've watched on there. So
Yeah, no, they're good at what they do. They're very good at what they do. Okay, so before we close this out, I want to get some personal wish lists for this series. Just give me 2 or 3 things you guys hope you see in the series. Saba, go.
First of all, I really want to see, my good old friend Elrond and what he's up to. Love to see
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
I'm actually really excited to see the new landscapes. I think areas of Middle Earth we haven't seen before. So
Yes.
Numenor being a big one, like just the sets
Yes.
designs, even before going to story. And the other thing I would say that I'd want to see, 3 things is a lot, but the third thing, let's just throw in, Anatar. Anatar would be really cool variation of Sauron.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yes, very cool. Christina.
I want to see Tom Bombadil if they can. Tom Bombadil, if they can put him in there. It was kind of like
Who
this
the fuck is
happy-go-lucky forest dweller character, and
Okay.
apparently there's a way that he could be in existence in this time frame. So I think that would be really
So-
fun if they could add that.
So there's
in.
actually people talking about this very obscure character.
Yeah,
Wow, that's kind of cool. All right, I dig that.
he kind of
what
was
else?
like the hobbits. They like stopped in to talk to him in the forest in one part of the story, and apparently they cut that out of the movie. It's one of the characters that were cut out, and yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. What else?
I'm really excited to see elves like in this time period, and I want to see them in all their glory and elegance. I think that's going to be really fun.
Dope.
And I guess like the last thing I want to see is I hope they do this story where Isildur cuts off the finger of Sauron. I'd be really excited to see that play out.
Cool. Okay. So for me, I'm definitely on Anatar. I got to see him go full Palpatine. I think that would be sick. I really want to see that happen. I definitely want to see Elrond and Elros make that decision about being a man or being an immortal. I got to see what leads up to that. I got to see the subtext. I got to see the inspiration. I got to see all that. As a writer, I just want to see what leads to both of their decisions. I want to see that so bad. What else? I really want to see them just some epic battle scenes. Like, just give me an epic battle scene in the first couple of episodes, and I'm happy for days. I'm good. And then, if possible, I wouldn't mind some nude female elves. That would be pretty gangster.
Okay,
so, there we go.
Frank.
So that's it for me. But yeah, no, I think this series sounds super exciting. The budget is insane. We talked about so much stuff that really just sounds like great storytelling, just it just has the potential to really lead to some epic action sequences, epic scenes, epic characters. And, it's inspired by probably the most prolific and most epic fantasy writer of all time. So I'm really stoked to see this happen. And I think it couldn't be on a better platform. I'm really excited to see what Amazon's going to do with this, because Jeff Bezos has so much money, and I don't see them not completing this series just for the sake of completing this series. So I'm really stoked for this. I think it's going to be awesome. Any final thoughts, Saba, Christina?
No, I'm just looking forward to it.
All right. Okay. Well, let's wrap this up. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We really enjoyed this episode. If you can't tell, I've been on cloud nine this entire episode. I'm so excited for this series. If you guys could head over to Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or Stitcher and drop us a review. And if you have any friends that are into all things geek, just like you, share our show with them. Tell them about it. Let them know that we exist. We'd really appreciate it. So we're going to sign off here. I'm Frank McGuire.
I'm Christina Didymus.
I'm Saba Mir.
Peace.